Bardock, father of Goku and the first Super Saiyan, and Omniman, the father of Invincible and Viltrumite defender of Earth. From just an outsider's perspective looking in on this matchup, these two characters have nothing in common. However, they're both dads that hail from an alien warrior race that spend their time conquering planets and committing, let's be completely honest, genocide. But that's actually not where the connections end, as both of them would eventually go on to learn to be more human and defend the planet they live on, as well as their family and loved ones. Now, listen up. This is not a revival of Combo Breaker. I know this falls in line with the kind of content I used to do when I did that show, but this is going to be done a little bit differently. I figured what better way to dip my toes back into Versus content than with a classic question of could my dad beat up your dad? But Alien Edition. So yeah, we're going to start off by taking a look at their powers, and of course we're going to start with my main man Bardock. I love that guy so much. He's one of my favorite Dragon Ball characters. So yeah, being a Saiyan, and more importantly a Dragon Ball character, Bardock has the ability to fly, as well as weaponize his ki energy. Ki in the world of Dragon Ball is just life energy. It's what flows through everybody's bodies, and you can learn to weaponize it. Bardock doesn't have a whole lot of powers and skills that come from this. He can throw big old energy blasts, and he can shoot big fuck-off lasers that can disintegrate people. That's about all you're going to get from Bardock from the energy power, the ki ability section. However, it is implied in the Ocean dub where Vegeta says that Bardock's an average fighter and a brilliant scientist, which is a bullshit line because Bardock is not a scientist. But yeah, in that version of the dub, Vegeta just straight up says that Bardock created the Power Ball or Artificial Moon technique, which allows Saiyans to use their energy to create a ball of energy that emulates the same energy the moon gives off. I'll get to why that's important later. While it's highly unlikely Bardock actually invented the technique, it's still likely that he would know how to use it, being a Saiyan warrior who was rising through Frieza's ranks for a while there and became essentially one of his most elite soldiers before Frieza got terrified that Bardock could overtake him in power and decided to just, nuke his entire planet with a giant ball of death. But yeah, that's basically it for Bardock's powers, but that's not it for what Bardock's capable of. As I mentioned earlier, if we assume he can create that artificial moon, he's capable of transforming into his Great Ape state. So Saiyans who still have their tail attached to their body can transform into what's called a Great Ape. Essentially, in a full moon's light, or in this case using the artificial moon technique, a Saiyan transforms into a giant King Kong-like monkey that can fire Godzilla-type lasers from his mouth, and that's so badass. But it's essentially a Saiyan's trump card a lot of times. It increases their strength tenfold and just lets them terrorize their entire species. Literally just look at this one scene from Bardock, the father of Goku, and you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Great Apes are fucking crazy. On top of that, Bardock would also go on to achieve the Super Saiyan form in the episode of Bardock after being sent to the past from Frieza's death ball, which is never explained how that happened, but hey, it happened. So yeah, he would eventually go on to learn how to obtain the Super Saiyan form, which gives him a 50 times strength and power and durability multiplied. It makes him 50 times better than he was before. But what does Omniman bring to the table? Well, Omniman is a Viltrumite, which means that he's got superhuman strength, superhuman speed, superhuman durability, and he can fly, or I guess technically as what he refers to as omnidirectional movement. In other words, he can fly. He's able to move through space freely, just like a human can walk on land. He can move through any space freely. It's just flight. They explain it through smart atoms or some bullshit like that, but it's the least logical way of explaining it. The best way I can think to explain it is imagine like you're in a VR game or whatever, how some VR games just kind of let you move freely through the air, or like Minecraft creative mode. That'd be the best way to explain how Omniman's flight works. Omniman also has enhanced senses because he's a Viltrumite, so he's just got better tuned senses. Which is something I forgot to mention in Bardock's section. He does actually have enhanced smell, which he uses like one time. It's really not that important of power, but talking about Omniman's super senses just made me think of that. So yeah, that's the basics of their power sets. They're not very complex kits or abilities because, well, Omniman is just meant to be a big, strong, punchy boy, and Bardock is... I mean, he's Bardock, he's cool and all, but he is a Saiyan Saga Saiyan. He's not going to be very complex. We don't get a whole lot of the cool Dragon Ball techniques until way later. Okay, so with powers and abilities out of the way, let's go ahead and move on to weaknesses. Yeah, we're going to talk about weaknesses before we talk about any feats or abilities, just so I can kind of get this out of the way. So starting with Bardock, Bardock doesn't necessarily have any physical weaknesses, at least not in like a kryptonite sense of way. Bardock he's a bit overconfident, which could be considered a weakness depending on who you're talking to and if he's in a fight where he's severely overwhelmed. But other than that, his only other weaknesses I can think of would be he's able to see the future, but he can't control when it happens or how far into the future he sees. However, that problem seems to be gone by the episode of Bardock, so it's questionable if it's even still a weakness for him. And that's, honest to God, really about it for Bardock's weaknesses. I mean, like I said, he's an early Dragon Ball character, so he's not going to have a whole lot of complexity to his powers or weaknesses or anything like that. So Omni-Man, on the other hand, since he has those super senses, means he's also got super sensitive senses. So ridiculously loud noises can actually affect him and hurt him quite a bit. They don't necessarily hurt him in the same vein that Kryptonite does, but it does throw him off, and it can cause his ears to bleed, which can cause problems later. So, now let's go ahead and move on to feats and accomplishments and everything, so we can start talking about how strong and fast and durable these characters are. And we're going to start with my main man, Bardock. So Bardock's incredibly strong. He's said to have a power level of 10,000 during the Father of Goku special, which will put him at the same power level as King Vegeta. Why is that important? Well, King Vegeta at one point just said, screw this shit, and blew up 3 planets with a single attack. And fun fact, blowing up 3 planets, pretty damn impressive. I know I can't do that, and I bet you can't. So yeah, blowing up 3 planets with 1 attack is super powerful. On top of that, he can turn into his Grade 8 form, which makes him 10 times stronger than his base form. And we do see his Grade 8 form is capable of destroying cities, but after I mentioned that whole blowing up 3 planets in 1 attack thing, yeah, the city destroying is kind of worthless. But yeah, 10 times stronger than the strength needed to blow up 3 planets in a single attack. Pretty powerful. And on top of that, he can access his Super Saiyan form, which puts him 50 times stronger than his base form. So if we take that power level needed to blow up those 3 planets, we multiply it by 50, and we've got Super Saiyan Bardock sitting comfortably around star level. Now speed, Bardock doesn't really fare necessarily as well. Characters at a similar power level to him during the events of like Z's Saiyan Saga, which would be a good way to kind of estimate where he would be speed-wise, usually only hit about light speed, thanks to scaling to Piccolo's, blowing up the moon at the beginning of Z. Basically, scaling how fast his special beam cannon went, we can get him to about light speed. So we've got Bardock being comparable to characters like Piccolo at the beginning of Z, having a similar power level, would put him at roughly the speed of light. Then we can add the 50 times multiplier on there, and we've got, essentially Bardock being 50 times faster than light in his Super Saiyan form. Not super fast, obviously faster than anything here that us humans on Earth can do, but in terms of Dragon Ball, that's really not that fast. 50 times faster than light is like nothing. So let's take a look at how Omni-Man compares. Omni-Man's tough enough to survive huge explosions, he can kill people with a single touch, he threw his son Mark so hard into a mountain it caused an avalanche, he was able to shatter a meteor the size of Texas with a single punch, and of course with the help of 2 other Viltrumites, he actually did destroy an entire planet. So again, super impressive feats to look at here. But yeah, that's about all we have for him. And the planet he did destroy with those other Viltrumites was already in a dying and kind of weakened state. So it's a weird feat to look at, but he did in fact help destroy that entire planet. Speed is a completely different story for Omni-Man though, as he's able to react to and destroy a meteor, which if it's moving through the atmosphere and getting ready for atmospheric reentry, would be moving roughly around sub-relativistic speeds, which is a percentage of the speed of light. So it's close, but not quite close enough. Other than that, he was able to kick his son's ass in a fight, and we see that Invincible's fast enough to dodge lasers, which obviously move at light speed, and Omni-Man himself has gone ahead and flown through space at ridiculously high speeds, traveling across entire galaxies in a relatively short amount of time. It's kind of weird to judge comic panels and how fast characters are flying across galaxies, but I think the rough estimate does put him somewhere in the thousands of times the speed of light, which is super impressive. So then what does this mean? Who would win this fight? Let's go ahead and compare them head to head now that I've kind of given you a brief overview of how strong they are and what they can do. So Bardock, like I said, is comparable to King Vegeta, who blew up those 3 planets, and Omni-Man was able to blow up a planet with the help of 2 other Viltrumites, and we do see him punch people through planets in later issues of the comic book and everything like that, so it's entirely likely he's capable of destroying a planet on his own. So we have Omni-Man at capable of blowing up a single planet versus Bardock, who's comparable to someone who can blow up 3. So let's just assume that they are close, but Bardock has that physical edge while in his base form. Speed-wise, however, like I said, we have Omni-Man sitting at roughly a couple thousand times the speed of light thanks to flying through those galaxies. And like I said, this is a rough estimate and calculation. So yeah, let's go ahead and say, so just for the sake of an argument, let's go ahead and lowball Omni-Man's speed and say he's only 100 times faster than light, okay? We'll put the feet there. Bardock in his base form is only roughly the speed of light. Not faster, not slower, just exactly the speed of light, thanks to scaling to Piccolo. So yeah, Omni-Man's a shit ton faster, but Bardock is stronger than him. So if we're talking base form Bardock versus Omni-Man, Omni-Man's going to be able to kick the shit out of him for a good chunk of this fight, just because he's so much faster. But I think Bardock, all he really needs to do is get a hold of him once, and he will destroy him. From what we see of Bardock's fights, we know he likes to grab people and likes to, create distractions with smoke screens and shit, and he shoots projectiles. But at the end of the day, he's a very grapple-heavy fighter. So all he really needs to do is grab a hold of Omni-Man once, which is going to be a tough task thanks to the speed gap, and then he can just wail on him. But let's ignore that for even a second. We haven't talked about Super Saiyan Bardock. I mentioned earlier that it makes him 50 times stronger, which means that he's going to have, about a 50 times edge over Omni-Man, since in base form, Bardock was already having a close fight with Omni-Man. So given this 50 times multiplier from Super Saiyan, Bardock could punch Omni-Man once and splatter his blood and organ stuff all over the pavement easy. It would be an easy one-hit kill for Bardock to land. The problem would still be the speed, because we're still looking at roughly 50 times the speed of light to a low-balled Omni-Man at 100 times the speed of light. So what we've hit here is now we have Omni-Man, who's still roughly twice as fast if we just use this low-balled number. But again, all Bardock has to do is grab him once, and then he's done for. Omni-Man can't survive more than just a couple of hits from a Super Saiyan Bardock, and that's assuming Bardock doesn't just hit him with his full force immediately. So I think the match, while it's not cut and dry because Omni-Man does have that huge speed advantage, is one that Bardock's going to win more often than not. If we ignored Super Saiyan and we went with just base form Bardock versus Omni-Man, then I'd be comfortable giving the win to Omni-Man. It wouldn't be an easy fight, but it'd be a win that he could take. The problem is when we start factoring that Super Saiyan transformation that he got in the episode of Bardock, it starts to become a very one-sided fight that is just not a match that Omni-Man can win. It really isn't. And there is some evidence we see in later issues of Invincible that would suggest maybe Omni-Man's stronger. He did fight with a character named Supreme who was able to outswim a black hole. But the problem is that when he was fighting Supreme, Omni-Man landed 2 hits at best during that fight, and while he did win the fight, it was only because Supreme lost his superpowers. So it's kind of debatable and iffy on whether or not that could count. And if you did want to count that feat, let's say hypothetically we did give Omni-Man that feat, then it would put him on par with a Super Saiyan Bardock, and thus Omni-Man would take the win. But because the factors of that fight are so iffy and weird, I don't feel comfortable using it for Omni-Man. So at the end of the day, because we don't have anything to support a stronger Omni-Man, Bardock's going to take this fight quite easily. All he has to do is hit Omni-Man once or twice as a Super Saiyan, and it's over for him. But yeah, that's just my take on the fight, and like I said, this is kind of loose rambling. It's completely unscripted. I just have my list of feats in front of me and everything. So yeah, if you guys like this style, maybe I'll do more matchups I like, and to kind of discuss them in this form more loosely, and just kind of analyze them from a more surface level instead of doing a whole production and everything with a script. But just let me know what you think in the comments, and yeah, I'll talk to y'all in the future. Have a great day, everyone.